I bet you didn't know Lion King didn't come from Disney. They stole that from Hamlet, remade it, wrote it out to be kid friendly, and that pissed me off because come to find out, I'm not gonna tell you the ending, but like what happens in Lion King didn't really happen in the original story. Let's talk about it. So, our boy Simba is Hamlet. I'm talking about young Hamlet because Hamlet, him and his father have the same name. So his name would probably be Junior, but I don't know. But anyways, Hamlet and Simba are the same person. Simba and Hamlet both have a similar story because they both were supposed to be king when their father died. But Simba was pushed away. He was tricked by Scar to run away and live on his own. He was pushed out. And then Hamlet, I don't know. I don't remember why he didn't take the throne immediately. I think it was Claudius's plot to keep the power to Gertrude by tricking her and telling her if she marries him, she would get to still be in power and be the queen, and he would be able to be the king and do, since kings have the total authority, even though he's not really the designated king since he married into royalty. Well, not really married into it because he is the son of the king, but to claim his royalty, he had to marry into it. So that was pretty shady, and it was a smart move on both parts. They both got to become royalty and have absolute power. So, but I no longer like Gertrude, who is Sarabi, and Sarabi in the movie, she rejected Mufasa. Not Mufasa. She rejected Scar, who wanted to be with her badly, which is, I'm guessing, pretty much the same thing because in Hamlet, he wanted to be with Gertrude, but she didn't want him. She wanted the king. Women love the man with all the power and all the riches, the wealth, the power, the hierarchy. So of course she thought smart. She married him, and then to to keep the power, she had to marry Claudius, so that way there would be a king, and Hamlet wouldn't have to take over, leaving her out of power. Claudius, we already know that Scar. Both killed their brother to take over the crown. The ghost in Hamlet is Mufasa. Well, the ghost's name was Hamlet, the father of young Hamlet. And that's Mufasa, the one who dies, which both of them killed by their own brother. Terrible story. Terrible action. Because when I first seen it, I was like, how do you hate your brother so much that the dude you grew up with, you killed him because of your greed to be in power? That's terrible. Then come to realize that of course he's gonna hate his brother because of the rejection from his father. Because in real life, of course, the king is gonna be more loving toward his firstborn son because that's his heir to the throne. That's the next person to continue his bloodline, his story, his great name, so to speak. So of course he's gonna show more love to his firstborn, which is what happened in both stories. Because if you watch, it doesn't show in Lion King, but if you watched Lion King, Tale of Two Brothers, I think it's called. That's where you find out how Scar came to be as ruthless and hateful toward his family as he is. Which that kind of the whole storyline just kind of faults the father, which I don't think we got a name for Hamlet's father. Well, not young Hamlet, but King Hamlet's father in the story Hamlet. And then you would probably get the name out of the movie Tale of Two Brothers. I don't remember it. But, and also, The Lion King, I didn't know they had other movies. Like, they have Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. Never knew that was a thing. Lion King, Tale of Two Brothers, never knew that was a thing. Until I did a little bit more research, which I'm going to go and watch those after this. But, best friends of Simba, well, the ones he grew up with, Pumbaa and Timon, are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Probably butchering their names. But, after Simba got pushed out of the valley, he met those two and they grew up together because this is going to be a problem. They grew up together in the, I think it was a forest or a jungle. And then in Hamlet, he went to school with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So that's how he knew them from young. But their characters are not as similar because in Lion King, Timon and Pumbaa, of course, the storyline, since they didn't know Scar as the king because they didn't live over in the valley with where Simba's from. Their alliance is gonna be to Simba because that's who they grew up with. That's been their friend for the longest. They raised him to be different and also for their own personal gain because he could protect them since he was a lion, and they could train him so that he would never want to eat them, unlike most other lions, because at first they were scared of him until I think it was Timon that got the idea. No, Pumbaa got the idea. Timon stole the idea. And then in the real story, Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were called upon by the king and the queen to come and talk some sense into Hamlet so he wouldn't be as foul and vicious to his parents, since he knew what really happened because the ghost who he had met in the beginning was his father's ghost, and he learned that his uncle, his father's brother, Claudius, killed him. And not even mourning the father's loss for 2 months, his mother Gertrude already married Claudius, which I agree was very foul. I would have been mad at her too, even though that's my mama. But then we get into Horatio, Hamlet's best friend, which is Rafiki, which is pretty different between the two stories because his best friends in Lion King, Simba's best friends, would be Timon and Pumbaa, which he doesn't meet Rafiki till right before he goes back to his Pride Lands so he can take back his crown from Scar, who had been lying to him, which he didn't know at the time. He just knew that Scar was terrorizing his home and he had to take over. He had to fix what he had brought upon since it was his fault. And Horatio, Rafiki. Horatio had been, I think I remember them saying something like they were friends from elementary or something like that. That's his oldest friend in the story Hamlet, which they change up in the Lion King. Nala and Ophelia. That in Lion King, Simba was supposed to be betrothed to Nala. In the beginning, it tells you that when he's talking to Zazu about why was he saying it's adorable that they were going to the watering hole together, because he didn't know he was supposed to be betrothed to her and had to marry her, and thought it was disgusting because that was his friend. As kids, you're not gonna see it like that. Of course, that's just your friend. But then in the future, they do end up together. I don't know. If anyone watching hasn't seen Lion King, I'm sorry. I'm going to be spoiling. Also with Lion King 2, if you haven't seen it, which I haven't seen, I'm going to spoil a little bit of that because I learned something from a YouTube video about something very huge, which I'm about to get into after I talk about Laertes. So Polonius would be Shenzi, the leader of the hyenas. If you don't remember, well, yeah, that was the name of the leader of the hyenas who tried to eat Simba and Nala in the beginning when they were in the elephant graveyard. And then Shinzi was a crafty character, tried to lie to Mufasa, talking about I didn't know this was your child, blah, blah, blah. And then Polonius, he's been trying to play Hamlet the whole time, not showing his true intentions, for always watching Hamlet, being on guard for what Hamlet is doing, and spying on him a bunch of the time in the movie. I mean, in the book or movie, depending on what you watched or read. Laertes. I'd say Laertes is the whole pack of hyenas, because Laertes was being led blindly by King Claudius, because it was Claudius's fault that Laertes' father Polonius had died. Which Polonius, I didn't really. At first, I wasn't sure if I was gonna compare him to anyone, but then I was like, but because of how shifty Polonius was, and how honestly Polonius seemed like he knew what really happened to the original king, but sided with Claudius probably to protect himself and not so he wouldn't die. Also, was doing shifty things for Claudius, which ultimately led him to his death. And for the hyenas, it led them to be kicked out of the valley again. So in both stories, they sided with the evil king and got hurt for it. Laertes as the hyenas, yeah. So Laertes, he tried to kill Hamlet in the end of the story, because he was being led blindly by by Claudius, the king, who was same as Scar, to ultimately part of the story, kicking out Simba in Lion King, which Laertes as the hyenas didn't do his job. He was supposed to kill Simba, but after he fell in the thorn bush, they didn't want to chase after, and they thought he was gonna die regardless. So, and then in Hamlet, he tried killing him in the fencing match, and ultimately got got hurt by his own poison dagger, leading to, I don't want to say it yet, but leading to his death and the death of some other people. The watch guards, I would say, was Zazu, and all the guards in general would be Zazu, because at first in the storyline, they're all siding with the king. Well, the guards and the hyenas could all be related to Zazu. Well, the guards could all be related to Zazu and the hyenas, because they're all blindly following after the king. Which, no, Zazu wasn't following that. Zazu had to follow after the king, or else he'd be eaten. But the rest of them, they were just blindly following after Claudius, the king. And then, which led to, at the end, they all had to leave. When they realized how bad the king Claudius was, they all betrayed him because they realized the truth of the matter. In the end, they had to betray Claudius because they realized he was evil, and a lot of things he did were to put himself into power, and they realized that he betrayed the kingdom and committed treason. And then, lastly, Fortinbras would be Vitani. If you don't know that character, that's because she is from the second movie. She's from the second movie, which is probably going to be a spoiler to a lot of people. So, if you don't want to hear what happens, I would skip like 30 seconds ahead. And because Vitani is one of the main attackers in The Lion King, Simba's Pride. She was a part of the clan, that the outsiders that attacked Simba's village, trying to claim power, which is similar to what Fortinbras was doing, since his father, King Fortinbras, had lost in a war to King Hamlet before King Hamlet had died. Young Fortinbras was trying to claim back some of the land, or even all of the land. Well, no, was trying to claim back all of the land that he had lost, or even claim all of Denmark for Norway, since they had lost it as in their revenge. Even though young Fortinbras wasn't the king, it was actually his uncle who, in Hamlet, the storyline seems to be that you can't be king for until a certain age, because both Hamlet and young Hamlet and young Fortinbras didn't become king after their father had died. Who both of them, they're named after their father, which is probably a little narcissistic. But anyways, both had lost their father, and then didn't take immediate claim of the kingdom. Their uncle had become both of them. Their uncle had become the king, and in Fortinbras' story, he was trying to, behind the back of his uncle, because his uncle was sick, he was trying to claim back the territory in fighting against Denmark. And that all leads, in the way they depict it in The Lion King, it's not the same story. Vitani is actually, if you look into it, is actually Nala's child. Because Vitani, if you compare her and her brothers, they look nothing alike. And even Vitani had alluded to that in one part of the movie where she said to Nala, "Where is your pretty daughter?" Because she was referring to the daughter that she kept because she had it with Simba, whereas the daughter Vitani that was in front of her, she didn't keep. She gave to someone else to raise because it wasn't Simba's child, and it seemed I don't think Simba knew about Vitani, and it seemed as because in natural order, lions are gonna get rid of any other lions that are male and could be a threat to their lead of their clan or of lead in the jungle. So even if Simba knew about Vitani being some Scar's kid, because in the storyline it would seem that Scar is most likely to have Scar would be the only one to have mated with any other lions, and he was trying to get Sarabi to mate with him, but that didn't work out for him. So he likely had to mate with Nala just to continue the bloodline and have someone take over, since he thought Simba was dead at the time. So with that being said, Nala obviously either didn't let Simba know about Vitani and gave her up to somebody else, or Simba forced Nala to get rid of Vitani because that wasn't his child, and he obviously, who's gonna want the person that killed their father, their kid, to be with them? It's the same. It's the same thing people will say. They're not gonna keep the kid if the woman got raped and the kid was a product of the rape. Obviously, they're not gonna keep the kid because when they see that kid, is gonna be hatred toward the kid because of their father. So at the beginning of both stories, we see Hamlet in it started off with right after they had seen the ghost with Horatio, because they had told Horatio about it, and Horatio wanted to come see it for himself before he were to go and tell Hamlet, just in case it wasn't true. But after that, it was the scene after the wedding where Claudius was trying to get on to Hamlet's good side so that Hamlet wouldn't show any hatred toward Claudius, also to reassure that Claudius would be safe from Hamlet finding out that he was the murderer of King Hamlet. Afterwards, we see Horatio come in and tell Hamlet what happened, and this is also after Laertes, who is Polonius' son and Ophelia's daughter. Oh wait, yeah, I did talk about Laertes. Laertes the hind, which is the lion, the hyenas. Laertes had talked to Claudius and asked him if he could go back to France, which is where he's from, and because he came from France to serve the king in their time of war. I would say with Norway, because that was the only war they talked about in the book and in the movie. So I would assume that Laertes was being drafted from France to go and help Denmark in their fight against Norway. So after that, Laertes had asked King Claudius if he could go back to his home so that he can live his life and probably, seeing as he's probably around the same age as Hamlet, probably go back to school, which Hamlet would have went back to school, but because in the story, his mother probably by the ideas of King Claudius, his mother wanted Hamlet to stay with her instead of going back to school. And don't remember where he was going to school, but he was going to school and he was in college with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So Claudius got Gertrude to beg Hamlet to stay, and he said he would to obey his mother. But this was all before he found out that his mother, well, his uncle was the murderer of his father, which he had suspected that there was some foul play, because he talked about how his mother, well, he didn't know if his mother was in on it, but he had talked about how his mother was quick to marry King Claudius, which is her brother-in-law and his uncle. And he called it incest, which I see it as incest too. That's sick. And then, yeah. So I don't know if he didn't really suspect that his uncle was the one that killed his father. But then when he finds out from the ghost, he was quick to believe it, because he knew that the way things were lining up, it had to be planned out. There was no way that all that just happened, and in the matter of time, it just happened like that. So with them beginning at the wedding, they're beginning without King Hamlet. Whereas in the story of The Lion King, it starts off with Mufasa and Simba going out. Well, Simba waking up his father to go on not, I don't want to say adventure, but to go out and scout to make sure everything is all right in the Pride Lands. And you see Mufasa teaching his son a little bit about how to be king. Things that Mufasa probably learned from his father when his father was neglecting Scar, which I think it comes from the book. If you read the book, the name of Scar was actually translates from Swahili. His original name translates from Swahili, and his actual name was Waste, which means his father did not like Scar because he was trash to him, since he had already had the son he needed to take over and be king, which ultimately is where Scar's hatred for both Mufasa and his father would probably derive from, because his father neglected him, and he seen Mufasa as the brother who was not ultimately, but who seemed better than him just because he was next in line and was older. So that hatred was what pushed Scar to killing his brother, well, formulating the plan with the hyenas to get his brother killed, and that way he could become king. And in turn, in Hamlet, that could be the same cause for King Claudius to want to kill his brother and become king, because he probably got the same neglect, since, of course, as king, you're going to do your duties to make sure you're going to put the kingdom first before your kids. And then when you eventually get to your your kids, you would have to, of course, teach the next in line, who would be taking your position, teach them to be like you, do right by the kingdom, to always make sure that the kingdom is thriving. That way, your son can continue what you built, what your father has built, what has been brought upon throughout your bloodline. And of course, that means already less time with Claudius, since they're already being somewhat neglected because he has a duty to the kingdom. And then now he's getting even less time because now the king has to show more attention to King Hamlet, when he was, I'm going to say King Hamlet because both of them are Hamlet, but to King Hamlet when he's a kid, so that he knows what he's doing, so that when he takes over, he's not going through problems and not knowing how to solve them without his father being there, since he's going to have to take over when his father dies. Or even if he took over before his father died, there's no guarantee the whole time he's king, he's going to have his father there for support to help him go throughout how to be a king, how to take control of the whole village or pridelands, and all the things of that nature. So leading into going from that, we see that I already talked about this, but they both get betrayed by their own brother, which leads to how Simba got pushed out. And in Hamlet, it wasn't the same way, whereas Simba was being lied to by Scar, being told that he was the reason for his father's death had he not been there in that area for the surprise that he had for his father, where he was trying to learn to roar, also being tricked by Scar. He put himself in a position where he was in danger and had to be saved by his father, which also led to his father's death. But what he didn't know was that Scar was the one that killed his brother, Simba's father, Mufasa, because from where he was at after he got saved by Mufasa, he couldn't see. All he saw was Mufasa climbing up the mountain, and then after he had disappeared from his vision, he just fell and hit the ground and got trampled by the rest of the herd. And in Hamlet, what happened was Claudius was already claimed king because he married Gertrude, and he was trying to, because he found out that Hamlet was speculating and onto him, and because of that, he was trying to get rid of Hamlet and sent him to England along with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and saying it was on the basis of him going crazy, which is also why I say Polonius was in on it, because Polonius was the one who not really lied, but had formulated this whole idea that Hamlet might be crazy because Ophelia had because of his love for Ophelia, which wasn't really the case. Of course, Ophelia didn't help out, because now that she has these thoughts that she was told by her father in the beginning, being told, oh, since he's the prince, he's gonna do whatever he needs to do for both to help himself and to help his kingdom, which was, he was trying to say that Hamlet is only showing that he loves Ophelia because he wants to, get tend to his flesh, But then when time comes to choose Ophelia or the kingdom, he's gonna get rid of Ophelia and probably slander her name and choose the kingdom over her, because that's his duty as the prince who's next in line to become the king. Now, when this leads to when after Prince Hamlet had found out about what really happened, he was now like in his head thinking about how he had been betrayed by him, and his father had been betrayed by both his mother and his uncle. And now when he goes to spend some time with his lady just to clear his mind, Ophelia in a way rejects him, and then makes him out to be what his Polonius, her father, had said he was, just using her for his lustful wants. Whereas that's not really the case, and if she had talked to him, she probably would have found out what really happened, because of course Prince Hamlet's gonna talk to his lady about these things, because that's how men usually use, or that's how they deal with their women. They use them as the emotional caretaker to help them when they're struggling through things. But then when he's trying to do that, she rejects his hand and thinks of it as he just wants to get a nut off, and since that's what her father Polonius had said. And that leads to her going back to him and saying that he was acting crazy, probably in love, because probably mad for love, and leads to this whole construct of Hamlet has gone mad, which helped King Claudius do what he needed to do to get rid of Hamlet and formulate his life and the kingdom how he would want it. Because of course at first he's just gonna be nice to Hamlet, so that Hamlet doesn't ever just want to betray King Claudius and just take the throne for himself when he's old enough, or if he's able to, or even if he finds out the truth about King Claudius, he'll be harder to believe it, because if they've already built a bond, he'd be like, oh, there's no way my uncle would have done that to his own brother. But since they didn't get to that point before Prince Hamlet had already found out the truth about King Claudius and how he betrayed his brother and committed treason, he was already in the mindset of he didn't trust his uncle, who was already doing a nasty deed, marrying his sister-in-law after soon after the death of his own brother. This led to later on when Polonius, if you watch the movie, when Polonius was hiding in Gertrude's room, as they were talking about how Hamlet was acting mad, he was quick to shoot, even though he was just in another room with his father. So I don't think he really thought that was his father hiding behind the curtain, because right before that moment he had tried to kill his father, King Claudius, in the other room before he went to his mom's room, Gertrude's room. he tried to kill him, but he saw that King Claudius was praying, and he was like, I'm not going to kill him if me killing him would just ultimate, since he is praying, he would be forgiven of his sins and go to heaven. He didn't want that to happen. He wanted his uncle to be cursed just like his father, since his uncle had killed his father before his father could pray and be relieved of his sins and go to heaven. Instead, he had killed him while in his sleep, which caused him to be in purgatory, because we saw he was a ghost and he could only come to our world during a certain time, which shows that. But because I seen that, I realized that he only showed up 2 times in the movie, which I thought Hamlet would have probably gone back to see his father a couple more times, but he only showed up twice, because the first time, the thing with ghosts is they only come back if they have a reason. So his first reason for coming back was to tell young Hamlet what really happened, and that his brother was his murderer. And the second time he came back was after young Hamlet had shot Polonius in Gertrude's room, to remind him that to not be not be evil or callous toward his mother, because she had no part of it, and she was just a fool to keep herself in power. And also to tell Hamlet to make sure that he does away with the real murderer of King Hamlet, which ultimately leads to the mother agreeing with everyone else, saying that young Hamlet was crazy because he saw the ghost in her room, but she didn't see anything, and he was talking to the ghost, but she didn't hear or see her old husband. So that, and him killing Polonius, just led her to believe that he was crazy, led her to go and talk to King Claudius and tell him that he's gone insane. He just killed Polonius, saying it was a rat, which if you seen the movie, you could tell he did not shoot thinking it was a rat. He knew someone was behind there. And even in the book, he said he thought it was his uncle, which I would have been like, I was like, how did you think it was your uncle when you just seen your uncle in the other room praying, and you were about to kill him, but you didn't because he was praying, and now you're gonna kill him even though he hasn't sinned yet, which you just said your plan for not killing him yet was because you're gonna wait till he's caught sinning and then kill him. That way, like your father, he would not be able to go to heaven. So I don't think young Hamlet really thought it was King Claudius. That was just what he was saying, so that his mother wouldn't hold it upon him the same way as if he would just shoot a person and just went on about it. He said it was a rat moving the curtain, but then again, he shot as if the rat was the height of a human. If it was a rat, he would have just shot down low. But obviously he knew someone was behind there and just said it's a rat just to cover up his want for killing somebody, which definitely had to do with his grief for his father, his anger toward his uncle and his mother. But he doesn't. The whole thing is his father tells him not to do anything to his mother, and he also, because that's his mother, of course he doesn't want to harm her, but he does feel betrayed by her since she didn't marry his uncle. Not even 2 months after his father's death or funeral, which shows to him that she didn't really love King Hamlet. She just wanted the power, and she married King Claudius. She married Claudius so that she could stay in power. This all led to the ending where after he came back from his trip to Europe where he was supposed to be killed. I mean, not Europe, to England where he was supposed to be killed, but I think he had escaped. Yeah, he had escaped, and in the story, I think Guildenstern and Rosencrantz had died, but in the movie, they had, that Timon and Pumbaa, those were the ones Simba grew up with, and they had went back with him to overthrow the king and take back Simba's rightful claim to the throne. So in Hamlet, this is the part that I didn't want to spoil earlier when I was talking about comparing Simba to Hamlet, because this part is where King Claudius, upon Hamlet's return, which they met with him at the funeral for Ophelia and Polonius, because after he had finally made it back, he was found at the grave. Him and Horatio were at the graveyard talking with a grave digger, and he had found out that the grave digger was digging up old bones from some of the graves to replace with the recently dead. And he had asked the gravedigger who did the skull belong to, and that's when he found out that the skull he was holding was the skull of the jester he used to love when he was a kid, who would make him laugh, hang out with him when he was a kid, things like of that nature, because as the prince, of course, the jester is going to hang out with you and your family because that's their role. And ultimately, I think, because most of the time in the past, kings would kill off their jesters if they weren't funny enough, or if they no longer served a purpose, or they had done wrong by the king or his family, which as a young kid, Hamlet probably didn't understand that the whole reason the jester had died was because he was killed for whatever reason we don't know yet. Well, we don't know because it doesn't ever get into that, since King Hamlet is already dead and we can't go and ask him. But they had Hamlet and Horatio had heard people coming, so they had hid behind a bush and found out it was Ophelia who had died, who had drowned herself. Ophelia being Nala, which Nala in The Lion King married Simba and became the queen. But in Hamlet, Ophelia had committed suicide and drowned in a lake because she went mad due to the death and grief of her father being killed. Which was when Laertes first. This was after Laertes had found out that it wasn't King Claudius that killed Polonius, his father, after his return from France. He had found out that it was actually Hamlet. And Polonius, afterwards, King Claudius had found out that Hamlet had survived because he got a letter coming from Hamlet saying, I don't remember what the note said, but it was talking about his return to Denmark. And so King Claudius had to make a plan to get rid of King Hamlet because he already knew that Hamlet knew about him murdering King Hamlet. He already knew that Hamlet didn't like him because he had married his mother. And before he sent him away, Hamlet had called him his mother because since him getting married to Gertrude makes them one, him and Gertrude are both the mother of Hamlet, which is one way to mess with someone you're mad at who marries your mother, calling them mom, instead of, since King Claudius wanted him to call him father because he was now being married to Gertrude and ultimately being his stepfather, which Hamlet had already talked about his disgust for that. And so he had planned to kill Hamlet, since Laertes was already mad that his father had been killed by Hamlet, he knew he could get Laertes to kill him. And in the plan, he had said that he was betting that Hamlet could beat Laertes in a fencing match, which the whole kingdom knew that Laertes, his whole reason for coming to Denmark was because he was a great soldier from France and got sent there off of his skill in fighting. But that was just how he could get Hamlet to agree to the fencing match, which is where they would betray Hamlet and get him killed by using an actual blade, giving Laertes an actual blade. That way he would be able to stab young Hamlet with I think it's called Lapier, something like that, that was dipped into poison. Now, in the fight, we see both in the book and in the movie that first round Hamlet had because if you don't know fencing, it's you fight with the sword and whoever lands a hit on the other person gets the point. So it's a round of 3. First round went to Hamlet. Second round went to Hamlet, and then they had a backup just in case Hamlet was getting the best of Laertes, that they would put poison in Hamlet's drink. But after the 2 rounds, Hamlet's mother, Gertrude, had drunk the poison, and even after King Claudius had tried to stop her in both the movie and the book, she she ultimately knew that it was poison for Hamlet to drink out of, because in the movie you can see that she looked back and she thought about it. She was like, why would it be a problem if I drunk out of it, even though it's for Hamlet? So she knew it was poison in that moment. So to save Hamlet, she drunk it. And then in the book, you don't see the same facial cues, but you can tell that she was like, it said in the book that she was drinking it for Hamlet, since she said she was drinking it for Hamlet, ultimately showing that she knew it was poison by King Claudius, which she probably at the time had already felt the guilt of marrying him, because she got told off by Hamlet that she was doing an incestuous deed, marrying King Claudius, sleeping with him every night, things of that nature. And she finally seen that her actions of marrying King Claudius and her greed to stay in power uh, made her didn't sit well with her son, who she loved, because that's the child she had birthed and raised her whole life to take over for her father, for her husband, and become the next king. So ultimately, I think she did it both to save her son from death and to get rid of her guilty conscience because she had married King Claudius. And that leads up to, in the movie it shows the third, well, in the book it shows in the third round that Hamlet had got cut by the blade, and yeah, in the book he had got cut by the blade, but it wasn't to a point where it was actual point, because it was like, it was as if the blade had scraped in and didn't actually get a hit. So the round wasn't done, and he was put into a position where they were both grabbing each other's arm, and he had took Laertes' weapon, and Laertes had took his weapon, and then he got a point. But in him getting the point, he stabbed Laertes, and they were both poisoned, which led to Laertes confessing what happened, and that the whole thing was the plan of the king, which he was only following blindly because of his rage and anger toward Hamlet because he had killed his father. And then that led to everyone finding out the truth about how King Claudius was the one that orchestrated the whole plan for Hamlet to get stabbed and die to poison, and if all else fails, him drinking the cup and getting poisoned that way. And they found out that Gertrude was to die because she drank out of the cup, and then Hamlet and Claudius were both to die because they both got stabbed by the rapier. That's the name of the sword. And because Hamlet wasn't just gonna die and let Claudius win, of course he stabbed Claudius, killing him both in the movie and in the book, which is a different turnout from what happened in The Lion King, where Simba had married Nala, took his rightful throne from Scar, and lived happily ever after. And later on in the second movie, having his own kid. What happened in Hamlet was all four of them died: King Claudius, Laertes, Hamlet, and Gertrude. And King Claudius tried to keep a brave face by saying to the rest of the guards that King Hamlet was committing treason against him since he was the king by stabbing him with the sword and killing and poisoning him. But all the guards knew by this point what was actually happening, that it was actually King Claudius who was the bad guy, and planned for Prince Hamlet to be killed, and also was the murderer of King Hamlet. Where in the book it tells you that I don't know if it was King Claudius or King Hamlet who had said because of because they're dying, to proclaim the status of the king status to Fortinbras, who was the prince of Norway, coming to, I don't know, at the time he was trying to claim back some of the land, even though he had already made peace and told King Claudius he wasn't going to attack and was just going to pass by that way he could fight a small portion of Germany right past Denmark, so that he can claim that territory for Norway. And then after doing that, he had came back to Denmark to actually.
It is time for bee lunch. Students at this time, please report to your designated.
He was going back to Denmark so that he can claim the territory that his father had lost when he had died in the war against Denmark and Norway. Little did he know he was going to find out he was going to be crowned king, because both the King Claudius and the Prince Hamlet were killed, and Horatio, that's what I almost forgot. Horatio was going to drink out of the cup to also follow Hamlet into death, because that was his best friend. And the whole time in the story, he was always by Hamlet's side, even though the king, throughout the whole story, because he knew what really happened to King Hamlet. He knew that King Claudius had betrayed and committed treason against Denmark. And Hamlet had stopped him from killing himself by drinking the rest of the poison out of the cup, and told him instead, let me live through you, and by you telling my story to the whole all of Denmark. That way everyone would know the betrayal of King Claudius, why everything happened the way that it happened, why Polonius got killed, even though he wasn't really a part of it, but he did kind of side with King Claudius, who had committed treason, and was helping King Claudius throughout, and how all the turmoil between Laertes and Hamlet had came to be. And Laertes Fortinbras being surprised that he was going to now be king of all of Denmark, which in the story is similar to in the story of the Lion King. one version of the Lion King, because there's, I think it's in one of the shows where Vitani, who was who is to be Nala's daughter that she had with Scar but was sent away, was to be given the power of the ancestors. If Sorry, I'm spoiling some more, but if you watch that, Vitani, who gets the power of the ancestors from Simba's kid, who knew that Vitani was more fit to lead because of the role she played in leading the Outlanders, even though they were the bad guys at first, but they had sided with Simba when they found out in the end of the Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, they found out that they were doing their actions for all the wrong reasons, even though, and they were to be the bad guy, and they ultimately had to realize internally that they would have to side with them, even if it would cause some consequences, get them killed because they had committed treason, or get them kicked out because ultimately they knew they weren't going to win because they were on the wrong side of the battle. But that caused Vitani to be rewarded for her actions and get the power of the ancestors, making her one of the new leader. That's all I really have for the story of Hamlet in comparison to The Lion King. I probably spoiled a lot. Should have said a lot more. Should have said a lot more times that spoiler alert. But that's all I have.